They won. Allah is on their side.
I'm smiling and I'm happy. I'm elated. It's a day of courage. It's a day of happiness.
Just like in London, no action was taken by the Australian authorities. At least 3 Sydney mosques have held commemoration ceremonies in honor of the fallen terrorists. These people would even side with aliens if it came to hating Jews. The saddest part is that these pro-Hezbollah protests were endorsed by the Australians' Greens Party.
You can't even bring yourselves to condemn Israel for the almost 11,000 killings that they have done.
Yes, they chanted in Arabic, Khaybar Khaybar, which refers to Muhammad massacring the Jews of the tribe of Khaybar. Later on, he was killed and his wife Safiya was taken as a sex slave by the great prophet himself. What a legend. And they celebrate him and they say he's the greatest man who ever lived. All right, folks, this is Harris Sultan and I've got some good news to share with you. But this didn't come about because the current Australian Labor government is very anti-Islamist terror sympathisers. No, that's not why it happened. In fact, they actually had been appeasing them since October 7th, which kept emboldening them to the point where they first chanted for Hamas and now they're even supporting Hezbollah, a listed terrorist organization by the Australian government. So, before I share my good news with you, you need to understand the circumstances that force Anthony Albanese to reluctantly take action against these Hezbollah supporters. But before that, I have to remind you that your support is absolutely paramount in keeping this channel going. You can support the channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Harris Sultan, where you get to see these videos before they are released to the public, among other benefits. But if you want to keep it simple, you can do that by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Harris Sultan. If you can't, then there is no need to feel bad. Just give it a like and share it with your friends so we can nip this growing Islamist influence in the West in the bud. So let's get to today's video. So, after the October 7th terrorist attack, Islamists living in Western countries who don't just hate Israel, but also the entire Western world, exposed themselves by celebrating the deaths of 1,200 Israelis in one of the worst terrorist attacks in living memory. Right here in Australia, just 2 days after the October 7th terrorist attack, Muslims in Sydney came out and chanted this. This wasn't all. They were also celebrating so openly and thought that this is it. They've got it. They won. Allah is on their side. Check out this video.
Weaving through traffic on Waterloo Road with Palestinian flags waving. A rallying cry echoing from Greenacre to Lakemba.
Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
There, a crowd hundreds strong gathered in response to attacks half a world away. Islamic leaders addressed the crowd.
I'm smiling and I'm happy. I'm elated. It's a day of courage. It's a day of happiness. It's a day of pride. It's a day of victory.
The Sheikh's comments this morning left Jewish leaders distressed.
This was just as bad as Muslims in London wearing paraglider stickers to glorify the terrorist who killed 1,200 Israelis. Just like in London, no action was taken by the Australian authorities. A lack of action only emboldens them. So, over the next 12 months, Muslims in Melbourne and Sydney continued to come out, continued glorifying Hamas, and still no action was taken.
Free Palestine, motherfuckers! Free Palestine, motherfuckers!
However, I must admit the Muslim community in Australia was not as brazen in their support of Hamas as their counterparts in Britain, Canada and the US. That's not because Muslims in Australia are more secular or liberal. It's simply due to something we call numbers. The reason we see a lot more pro-Hamas Muslims in Britain is that Britain has more Muslims than Australia. Britain has nearly 4 million Muslims, whereas Australia, fortunately, only has around 800,000. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that all of these Muslims are pro-Hamas or pro-terror, although the vast majority would want Israel to be destroyed.
The river to the sea! From the river to the sea!
But let's be generous here. Not all of them would be pro-terror. In other words, Britain has tens of thousands of radical Islamists, whereas purely due to smaller numbers, Australia would only have, say, a few thousand radical Islamists. So, the moral of the story is, the more Muslims you have, the more radical Muslims you have. As Australia's Muslim population grows, the number of radical Muslims will also grow from a few thousand to tens of thousands, just like in Britain. Nasrullah, who was responsible for killing nearly 100,000 Muslims in Syria, is being celebrated by Muslims all over the world. They have forgotten that he's a Shia. They have forgotten that he has killed tens of thousands of Sunnis. But because he also hated the Jews, and since hating the Jews takes precedence over everything, they are now protesting against the killing of Nasrullah. Now, Muslims have come out in Melbourne chanting anti-Semitic slogans in favor of Nasrullah and Hezbollah. Now, before you say, oh, they are just some outliers, as some of the protest organizers have said, it's not some fringe movement among Muslims to celebrate and glorify Hamas or Hezbollah. At least 3 Sydney mosques have held commemoration ceremonies in honor of the fallen terrorists. We are no longer just dealing with pro-Hamas sympathizers, but also pro-Hezbollah sympathizers. These people would even side with aliens if it came to hating Jews. Check out Australia's national broadcaster ABC News trying to cast aspersions on whether it is fair to even call Hezbollah a terrorist organisation in this painfully awkward question to Australia's opposition leader Peter Dutton.
What, sorry?
What determines the fact that Hezbollah is a terrorist organisation, even though many...
Where are you from, I'm sorry? Which organisation?
ABC.
ABC. So what's the question from the ABC, just to be very clear?
I just wanted to find out because groups have commented on the...
No, but you asked about the listing of the organisation. I just didn't understand that question, sorry.
Yeah, so...
This is a question from Canberra, is it? You're reading it from your phone?
No. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of looking into that for the investigations, you've asked the Prime Minister and the Minister to direct the ANRB in its investigation.
No, that wasn't the question you asked. What was the question you asked?
I just wanted to understand.
No, you asked the question about the listing, so I just want you to just ask that question again.
If you could just sort of explain what determines something of a terrorist organisation.
Well, I had presumed up until this point at least that the ABC supported the government's laws, and the government has passed laws supported on a bipartisan basis, but not by the ABC, it seems, in relation to the prescribing or the listing of a terrorist organisation. Hezbollah, under Australian law, is a listed terrorist organisation. Now, if the ABC doesn't support that, they should be very clear about it, because I think that's quite a departure. But you asked me why our country has listed Hezbollah. They're a terrorist organisation. They organise terrorist attacks. And if that is not clear to the ABC, then I think the ABC is in greater trouble than even I first imagined.
Well done, Peter Dutton, for humiliating the silly ABC journalist who has fallen for Islamist propaganda, questioning whether those who kill ordinary civilians as a means of achieving political goals are terrorists or not. By the way, since this debacle, ABC has actually distanced itself from that journalist. The saddest part is that these pro-Hezbollah protests were endorsed by the Australian Greens Party. The Australian Greens is the most anti-Israel party in Australia. Their deputy leader and senator for New South Wales, Mehreen Faruqi, has been accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza and calling for a ceasefire. Check out one of her sanctimonious speeches in the Australian Senate where she shamed the Labor Party for not calling for a ceasefire, yet conveniently forgot to mention Hamas.
The Labour government is seeing a child being killed every 10 minutes but won't call for a ceasefire. Happy to talk weasel words, but weasel words are not going to stop war crimes. You can't even bring yourselves to condemn Israel for the almost 11,000 killings that they have done. I mean, how much cowardice are we going to see from this government? I mean, truly, have a heart.
Previously, she also took this photo with one anti-Semite who was holding a sign saying, "Keep the world clean of Israel," effectively calling for the abolition of a UN-recognized state, Israel. When called out, she conveniently and quietly deleted that post later on. This wasn't it. The Australian Federal Police came out and said the mere public display of a prohibited symbol on its own does not meet the threshold of a Commonwealth offence. To be considered an offence, the prohibited symbol had to be displayed in circumstances where the conduct involved spreading ideas based on racial superiority or hatred, inciting others to intimidate or offend a person, or advocating or inciting others to offend. Yeah. Displaying the signs of Hezbollah, a known terrorist organization, doesn't meet the threshold. They're using the ambiguity of our laws against us. How is glamorizing Hezbollah, a listed terrorist organization by the Australian government, not going to entice people to intimidate or even offend Jews, especially when they chanted death to Yahud or Khyber Khyber?
خيبر خيبر يا يهود جيش محمد سوف يعود لبيك يا نصر الله لبيك يا نصر الله.
Yes, they chanted in Arabic Khyber Khyber, which refers to Muhammad massacring the Jews of the tribe of Khyber, where he killed the Jewish chief Usair ibn Zarim and took his daughter Safiya as a sex slave. Oh, and before that, he also tortured her husband Kinana, who was a treasurer of Khyber, to obtain information. Later on, he was killed and his wife Safiya was taken as a sex slave by the great prophet himself. What a legend. And they celebrate him and they say he's the greatest man who ever lived. Yeah, kill a man and take his wife as a sex slave. What a great man. That is what they were chanting right here on the streets of Melbourne, telling the Jews that what Muhammad did to them 1400 years ago, they will do that here to them. And the Australian Federal Police said that they haven't crossed the threshold of a Commonwealth offence. Oh, you Jews, all my life I believed that you had all Western institutions in your pocket. How wrong I was. These people have been calling for your blood on the streets of Sydney, Melbourne, London, Toronto, New York, and many other Western cities. And the authorities say, sorry, it's not that serious. However, all is not lost. Thankfully, Peter Dutton has been calling out this cowardice of the Labor government and pressuring the government to cancel the visas of those who are on our streets chanting anti-Semitic slogans. Let me quote Peter Dutton. It is shocking to see open support for a listed terrorist organization in our country. The events over the weekend were a national disgrace. The Albanese government failed to act and lacked the necessary resources to address these criminal acts. Here's a statement that he released on the 1st of October.
In our country, we want people to be able to protest safely and to do it peacefully, but we don't want the glorification of a terrorist organisation. And there are worrying signs. Was as strong a language as the Prime Minister could use. I think most Australians would be pretty shocked and horrified by the scenes and what we've seen in terms of young kids and others being told that this man was a great man. He was a terrorist and the leader of a terrorist organisation. This is hate, it's anti-Semitism, and it's eerily similar to what we saw on the steps of the Opera House on the 9th of October, where people were allowed to get away with this sort of conduct. And the Australian Federal Police, And over the last 12 months, it's just escalated. And it's going to end in tragedy unless the Prime Minister shows that strength of leadership.
So, Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke demanded New South Wales and Victorian authorities to check the visa status of demonstrators who are alleged to have glamorized Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah. These people could be arrested for a year or have their visas cancelled. Let's hope some of it does indeed happen. Tony Burke also said, "I won't hesitate to cancel the visas of visitors to our country who are spreading hate." The Australian Federal Police has now said that they have started making arrests under the operation called Operation Advana, where they will investigate at least 9 incidents of displaying prohibited symbols. The AFP further said that it is likely the number of investigations will increase and some state and territory police agencies have their own investigations underway. I'm glad that Australia is nothing like Britain, and our Labour Prime Minister Albo, although a bleeding heart who is always looking to appease radical Muslims, is still miles better than our two-tier Keir, who is too scared to even mention these pro-Hamas and now pro-Hezbollah terror sympathisers. Let's hope Australia doesn't go down the way of Britain, and maybe, just maybe, people will start taking these in-house radical Islamists seriously. So I hope you liked today's video. Like, share and subscribe to the channel. You can also support it by becoming a patron on patreon.com/Harris Sultan, or you can buy me a coffee on buymeacoffee.com/Harris Sultan. If not, then no big deal. Until next time, ta-da. If you'd like to support my work, you can become my patron by going to patreon.com/Harris Sultan, or you can simply buy me a coffee.